What time is it where you are? And where in the world are you listening from tonight? If you're settling in to relax or drift into sleep, welcome. You're in the right place. Let's dim the lights and gently go back in time. The wind out here doesn't blow, it drags. Long and low like a worn-out sigh curling over dead roots and boot prints half swallowed by dust. It doesn't howl unless you're listening for it. Mostly it just moves things, loose hat brims, brittle weeds, the corner of a wanted poster flapping tiredly against a sun-bleached wall. There's no music in the Wild West, not the kind you'd think. No orchestras, no soundtracks, just the rhythmic creak of leather saddles, the clink of spurs on splintered floorboards, the hollow echo of footsteps in a place where no one asks your name unless they already need something from you. The moment you set foot out here, something is taken from you. Water, maybe. Time. Or the softness in your voice. You don't always notice when it happens. You just wake up one morning, cracked lips and squinting eyes, and realize there's no one left who remembers what you looked like back when your hands were clean. You wouldn't survive a day in the Wild West. Not because you're weak, but because this place doesn't care about strength. It respects endurance, toughness without flair, willingness without praise. It's not about how fast you can draw or how loud you can speak. It's about whether you can walk into a saloon full of people who already made up their minds about you and still take a seat, still drink the water, still sleep with your back against a wall, hand on your belt, listening for the sound of boots that don't match the rhythm of the night. Morning out here doesn't begin with birdsong. It begins with thirst and silence, the kind of silence that tastes like iron. You wake before the sun's up because your sun isn't your friend. It's an enemy dressed in gold. You need to be moving before it finds you. If you're lucky, your boots haven't frozen. If you're unlucky, your horse is gone. You reach for your canteen, not to drink, but to check if it slushes. That's the sound of life. That's the difference between getting somewhere and becoming part of the bones scattered out by the trailhead. No one's coming to help, and if someone is, they're probably not helping. You wouldn't last an hour. In the saddle without knowing where to sit. Too far forward and your knees lock. Too far back and the horse feels your fear. The trick isn't in controlling it. It's in convincing it you're part of the plan. Even your sweat smells different. Out here, it's not the sweat of work, it's the sweat of watching, of waiting, of wondering whether that man on the ridge is just looking for shade or counting how many bullets you might be carrying. There's no room for second chances. Everything you do out here, you do like it matters, because it does. Even blinking too. Slow can be taken as weakness. Even reaching for a handkerchief too quick can get you put in the dirt. In town, the rules are different, but just as brutal. You step through the swinging doors of a saloon and the whole room turns quiet in a way you don't notice until too late. Men don't smile unless they're drunk or about to lie. Women don't talk, unless they've decided what they're going to cost. And the bartender doesn't ask what you want. He just waits for you to speak first. Say the wrong thing, and you'll hear chairs shifting behind you. Boot heels clicking once, twice. A breath held somewhere in the back. People don't fight with fists here. They fight with eyes, with pauses, with the kind of silence that says, I know something about you I haven't said yet. And you have to be ready to leave before you even sit down, because sometimes someone's already decided you're not supposed to be here, and they're just waiting for the right reason to prove it. There's no clock in a Wild West jail. There's just light and shadow, and the sound of someone scraping their spoon too slow against a tin plate. If you end up behind bars here, it won't be because you did something wrong. It'll be because someone said you did. And the sheriff? He's not always the law. Sometimes he's just the best liar, or the one with the steadiest hands. You don't ask questions here unless you already know the answers, and you don't offer your story unless you're ready for someone to twist it. Because the Wild West doesn't care about what's true. It cares about what's believable. And what's believable is usually decided by whoever speaks first and loudest. You wouldn't survive a day out here. Not because you're soft, but because you still expect the world to reward goodness. Out here, goodness is something you bury with the rest of the bodies. It's a luxury, the kind of thing a dying preacher might whisper into the wind before he's eaten by coyotes. You survive by doing what has to be done, by not crying when you see someone hanged, even if you knew them, by not flinching when someone spits blood on your boots, by not asking why that little girl at the general store doesn't speak, just paying for your flour and tipping your hat, because everyone here has a reason. And most of those reasons don't lead to heaven. You wouldn't make it to sundown, the heat would take you, or the cold or the dust or the doubt. There's a moment around 4 p.m. in the Wild West where everything goes quiet, not peaceful, but expectant. Like the land itself is waiting to see what kind of person you really are. The sun is behind you now, dragging your shadow out ahead like it's warning you what's coming, and your horse is tired, and your eyes are dry, and your hands haven't relaxed all day. You think maybe you'll make it, that maybe, just maybe, you figured it out, but then you hear it. A click, not loud, just sharp, a trigger being readied, a door swinging open, the flap of a coat someone didn't wear this morning, and you realize you forgot to check behind you. That's what the Wild West is. It's not dust and guns and gold. It's forgetting. Forgetting what safety feels like. Forgetting what it's like to not feel watched. Forgetting how to sleep without something pressed under your pillow. And the worst part, the part they don't write about, is how easy it is to adapt, how fast your voice becomes flatter, your kindness more rare, your hopes smaller, how quickly you start to look like everyone else, weathered, squinting, suspicious, until one day you walk past a mirror and barely recognize your own eyes, and it's too late. You're not surviving the Wild West anymore. You're part of it, and it won't let you go. Out past the last fence post, where the barbed wire rusts and the horizon curls under itself like parchment left too long in the sun, there's a sound most people don't recognize. Not at first. It isn't the howl of wolves, though that comes too. It's the sound of old wood groaning in the heat, of a water pump coughing up nothing, of a town that once had a name, now just called Over There by anyone who still remembers it. That's the Wild West for you. Even when you think you're somewhere, you're not. You're always on the edge of something worse. You wouldn't last long without a map. But here's the thing. The maps are wrong, always have been. They show mountains that aren't there anymore, trails that washed out in last year's flood, names scratched over 3 or 4 times because nobody wants to remember what happened under the last sheriff. So you don't follow the maps, you follow the buzzards, the tilt of trees in a wind that doesn't reach the ground, the lines carved into a boulder by someone long dead who knew just enough to leave a warning. And if you're lucky, someone alive might pass you on the trail, squint once at your boots and say something vague like, "You'll want to ride wide of Silver Creek." Not saying why, just ride wide. And if you're smart, you do. You don't ask why, you don't ask anything. Because questions mean curiosity, and curiosity gets you mistaken for lawmen or bounty hunters or someone who might testify. Out here, even looking interested can make you disappear. The sun doesn't set out here like it does back home. It drops like a curtain pulled fast. One moment it's golden. The next you can't see your hand unless it's on fire. That's when the world changes. The rattlers come out, the men who don't ride during the day. The sounds shift, from dry wind to distant metal, a buckle jangling, a cough behind a rock. The sudden hush of birds that know something's moving with breath and weight. You light a fire, but small, never too bright. A bright fire says, "I'm not afraid." And that's just asking for someone to make you regret it. So you make it small, and you sit with your back to something hard, and you don't fall asleep so much as lean into exhaustion with one eye cracked, heart ticking like a pocket watch too. Close to breaking, sleep if it comes isn't restful, it's thin. Like a sheet between you and everything that wants you gone. Your dreams don't help. They're dry and filled with smoke. You dream of creeks you can't drink from, letters you can't finish writing, faces with eyes turned just slightly the wrong way. And when you wake up, there's always that half second where you wonder if someone's watching. Sometimes they are. Sometimes it's just the coyotes. But sometimes it's worse. It's a man with no hat and too clean of boots, or a woman with a scar so long it touches both corners of her mouth, or a child who doesn't blink. You learn to pack quickly after that. You learn to ride without breakfast. You learn not to whistle, because out here even the wind might be listening. You make it to a town by midday. It isn't much, nothing ever is. A few buildings squatting like they're ashamed of themselves. A hitching post leaning sideways. A general store that sells exactly what you don't need. And a saloon that pretends it's respectable until someone bleeds. You tie up your horse. You keep one hand on your belt. You push through the door and wait. Not for the music to stop, there is no music. Just the stillness, like someone inhaled but didn't exhale yet. And then it happens. One man turns, then another. And before you've even ordered water, they've already decided what kind of person. You are too clean, you're a gambler. Too dirty, a drifter, too armed, a bounty man, too quiet, a liar. No one is just passing through out here, everyone has a reason. And if you don't offer yours fast enough, they'll make one up for you, and the one they invent won't end kindly. The bartender doesn't ask your name. He just sets down a glass that smells like kerosene and says, "Don't cause trouble." That's the Wild West version of a greeting. You nod. Because saying thank you sounds too much like you've got manners. And manners imply wealth. And wealth implies pockets worth checking. So you just nod. You drink. You leave the coin on the table. Slow, like it might bite you. And you back out the door like a man who's been in too many rooms where people didn't come out alive. Because out here you never turn your back first, even to say goodbye. The sky is too big. That's what nobody tells you. It's too blue, too empty, like it's watching you. Clouds don't drift here, they float with purpose, like scouts, and every gust of wind feels like it carries news from somewhere worse. You ride under that sky and start to feel small in a way that's dangerous, because the moment you feel small, you start hoping someone out there might show you mercy, and that's a mistake. Mercy doesn't live here. It moved out long before you arrived. There's a stagecoach stopped up the trail. 3 men are standing beside it, guns in hand. You think about riding past, but you don't. You stop. One of them steps forward, hat tipped back. "You seen anyone headed west this morning?" You shake your head. He stares a while longer, then nods toward the coach. "Reckon we got room for one more if you're not particular." You are particular. You don't say it, you just nod. You climb in. And inside, 3 women. None speak. One has dried blood on her sleeve. None of them flinch when the door closes. They're used to worse. Then you. That's how you know you're in deep now. Because once you've entered a coach with people who don't ask questions, you've crossed a line you can't uncross. Night falls again. You don't set a fire this time, you sleep under the stars, or try to. But they're too sharp, too many, too bright. You start to feel like they know you, like they've been watching since. You left the rail line. and they're just waiting for you to fail. You lie there and think about water, about bread, about the sound of your mother's voice before you decided to head west. You think about how you used to be someone who mattered, and now you're just a body in the dust pretending it knows how to survive, because the truth is, you wouldn't survive a day in the Wild West, not because of the bullets, not even the snakes, but because of the wearing down, the way the silence chips at your name, the way the heat unbuttons your pride, the way every mile feels like it's peeling back who you were and replacing it with someone colder, thinner, harder, someone who doesn't wave at children anymore, someone who doesn't pray, but doesn't mock those who do, someone who has stopped expecting to be remembered when they're gone, and just wants to make it to the next patch of shade. The Wild West doesn't kill you in a blaze, it kills you in pieces. One kindness you don't extend, one fear you don't admit, one road you don't take because the dust looked wrong, and when you finally do fall, body curled behind a boulder, empty canteen still clutched, you won't be buried. You'll be forgotten, like most, like all, like everyone who thought they could tame a land that doesn't even know it's wild. Somewhere near the salt plains there's a shack made of driftwood and regret. You wouldn't notice it unless you were lost, and by the time you saw it you'd already be too tired to turn around. The door doesn't lock. Nothing does out. Here. You just wedge a piece of bone between the frame and pray that whatever's out there respects tiredness more than fear. Inside the shack, one cot, one jug, one journal with no words, just scratches. Lines, as if someone tried to write, then changed their mind. The only real object of value? A pair of worn-out boots by the bed, much too big for a woman, much too clean for a man. No one's sure who lives there anymore, but the porch still creaks under weight when no one's around, and the fire pit has fresh ash every morning. The West wasn't built with dreams. It was built with forgetting who you were before the dust got in your teeth, before your skin turned the color of old rope, before your eyes started scanning every ridgeline like they expected bad news. Most people out here didn't come to start something. They came to end something. A name, a story, a law that reached too far. So they crossed rivers, plains, deserts, until the sun and wind erased all but their outline, until even the mirror stopped recognizing them, and then they stayed. Because to go back would mean explaining who they used to be, and nobody out here wants to explain anything. You can go days without hearing a real voice, just the clop of your horse, the wind, the dry shuffle of your coat as you shift in the saddle, maybe a whistle on the edge of the wind that might be a bird, or something else trying to sound like one. The isolation isn't the problem. The comfort is. Because once the quiet starts feeling safe, you stop looking over your shoulder. And the Wild West loves a man who forgets to check his back. You stop at a trading post near a canyon rim. There's no sign, just a few crates, a barrel full of water, and a man too old to guess. He doesn't say hello. He just nods and chews something. Green. You ask if the trail east is safe, he shrugs, then finally says, safer than the trail west. That's the most anyone's said to you in 3 days. You nod back, pretending like that's enough. But something in the way he looks past you, like he's measuring the air behind your head, makes you ride on without filling your canteen, and 2 hours later, when you find boot prints in the dust where no trail should be, you realize you should have asked more questions. But you don't go back. You just ride faster. Towns out here aren't permanent. They shift like mirages. A new general store opens. The saloon burns down. A preacher shows up, stays 2 months, and leaves after burying a child no one will claim. Everything feels like it's happening for the first time and the last time, all at once. A man named Harrow builds a schoolhouse. On a hill, paints it white, hangs a bell. 2 weeks later, it burns. No one investigates, because they already know. The land didn't want it. That's how it works out here. You build something kind, something pure, and the ground itself rises up to remind you, this isn't a place for that. This is a place for broken things. The women of the West know more than the men. They have to. They know which herbs stop bleeding, which mushrooms lie, which kind of silence means someone is hiding in the barn. They speak softly, but they never repeat themselves. They sow with speed. They bury things without markers. Sometimes you'll see one standing in the doorway of a cabin, holding a rifle like a broom. Not angry, not scared, just ready, like she's been waiting her whole life for someone to make the wrong decision. You wouldn't survive long talking the way you do now. Too many questions, too much trust. The women of the West don't trust smiles. They trust who sweats first when trouble walks in. And if you sweat, you don't get invited back. You meet a boy no older than 15. He's barefoot, shirtless, carrying a knife longer than his forearm. He offers you a tin of beans without speaking. You ask his name. He shrugs. Later you find a wooden tag nailed to a tree. Caleb, too fast for God. No one explains it, but you never forget the look in his eyes when a snake passed near your campfire and he didn't even flinch, just smiled. Like the snake was an old friend. Food is different out here. Not worse. Just more indifferent. Hard biscuits that crack your teeth, jerky that might not be beef, coffee that tastes like bark, water that's always suspiciously warm. You eat to survive, not to enjoy. A peach is a miracle. A fresh egg is gospel. Honey is a reason to fight. You once saw a man ride 40 miles just to trade his last bullet for a bottle of molasses. He wept when he tasted it. No one mocked him, not even the killers. The West doesn't try to break you all at once. It waits, it watches, it lets you think you're doing well. And then in the middle of a ride or a quiet bath behind a waterfall or a slow drink under the stars, it reminds you that your boots are wearing thin, that your canteen's got more rust than water, that the trail you trusted last week is now full of buzzards and broken arrows. You don't cry, you just nod, because the West isn't cruel, it's honest, and honesty out here means pain. Somewhere near the border there's a graveyard with no names, just stones. Each one has a mark, slash, circle, spiral. No one remembers who made them, but every new arrival walks through that graveyard at least once, not to mourn, to choose, to look down at one of those stones and think, that one. If I die out here, let me be that one. Not because the life was good, but because the death looked quiet, and quiet is the most anyone hopes for by the end. You wouldn't survive a day out here because you still hope someone will write about. You out here no one writes, they carve, they bleed, they whisper, and then they vanish and the dust rolls on like nothing happened. There's a story they tell in one of the canyon towns, the kind built low into red rock and shadow, where the heat folds over itself like old leather and the stones glow long after the sun sets. They say a rider came once from far east, too clean, too confident, too full of names. He walked into town with a coat stitched in places that didn't need stitching, like he wanted people to ask where he'd been. But no one asked. The townsfolk watched him drink, watched him tip too much, watched him whistle at a woman no one else dared look at. By nightfall he was gone. No blood, no noise. Just a bed left made too tightly and a horse chewing grass alone by the post. The lesson isn't about fear, it's about not needing a reason. Out here, sometimes you disappear because someone didn't like the way you laughed, and the canyon keeps the secret. You keep moving west, not because you're brave, but because you're too ashamed to turn around. That's the part they don't tell you in the dime novels. Nobody's chasing glory. They're running from silence, from courtrooms, from letters they never sent. And the farther you go, the harder it is to remember the voice you used to use when you said your own name. Now, when someone asks, you pause too long, not because you're lying, but because you're not sure if the truth still fits. You come across a man dying under a tree. He doesn't ask for water, he asks if the moon's out. You look up. It is. He nods, then closes his eyes, says, "Good." I'd hate to go without seeing it one more time. You sit beside him for a while, not out of kindness, just habit. Then you bury him, no name, no marker, just a handful of dust over his eyes. Because out here, a name only gets you followed, but a quiet end. That's worth something. There's a little mining town tucked into a slope of shale and pine where nobody speaks above a whisper, not even the dogs. You walk into the saloon, and there's a chalkboard instead of a bartender. You write what you want, they bring it. You nod, they nod. If you talk, people stare. If you talk twice, you don't get served. You ask someone why it's like this. They don't answer, but you notice one wall near the piano is covered in holes. Not bullet holes. Just marks. Like someone pressed the barrel of a gun there again and again and no one ever patched it. You never raise your voice again in that town, and when you leave, you don't say goodbye, you just ride quieter. Horses in the West aren't pets, they're more like shadows, reflections of how you ride, how you breathe, how you carry your worry. If your horse flinches, it's not because of thunder. It's because you lied to someone yesterday, and it knows. There are riders out here who tie red string around their horses' necks, not as decoration, but as apology. You see it once, and you start noticing them everywhere. And then one day, when your horse won't look you in the eye after a bad deal in a card room, you tie one too. And you ride with your head lower, because even the animals here know what kind of man you're becoming. You meet a girl who says she talks to ghosts. You believe her, not because she's convincing, but because in this land the ghosts are louder than the living. She points to a bend in the river and says, "That's where my brother died." You ask what happened. She says, "He never learned how to leave something behind." Then she laughs like she didn't say anything strange and keeps walking. And you think maybe that's what survival means out here. Not escaping death, but knowing when to forget it. There's a wind that only comes through once a year. It sounds like singing. Soft, low, like someone humming an old lullaby through their teeth. When it comes, people close their doors. They leave a glass of water by the window and whisper names of people they miss. Not to summon them, just to remember. You do the same. You don't say anything too loud. You just think about someone who once touched your shoulder in silence and made the world feel safe for a moment. Then you sleep, knowing the wind will carry that thought somewhere it belongs. Guns in the Wild West aren't shiny. They're worn down. Wooden handles rubbed soft from years of sweat. Metal dulled like it forgot how to reflect light. You carry one. Not because you plan to use it, but because not carrying one is a different kind of invitation. You learn not to draw fast. You learn that most gunfights don't end like stories. They end with someone missing and someone bleeding, and both of them. Not sure what was worth all that noise. You stop polishing your gun, you stop naming it. It's not a friend, it's a sentence waiting to be read. One night, you camp near a dry riverbed and wake to find a man sitting by your fire. He doesn't move, doesn't speak, just stares into the coals, like he's trying to remember a life that ended before he was born. You ask if he's lost. He shakes his head. Then he says, "I used to be kind. Then the West asked me what I wanted more." He leaves before the sun rises. You never see him again. But for weeks after, every time you pass a mirror, you check your eyes for kindness. And sometimes you don't find it. Eventually, even your shadow looks tired. It trails behind you slower. It doesn't reach for your feet when you step into light. People stop calling you sir. They stop calling you anything. You become a shape they recognize but don't address, the kind of figure you look at sideways in case it asks for something you can't give. You wonder, not if you'll die out here, but if anyone will know when. It happens. You wonder if your boots will be found upright or sideways, if your name will be carved or burned, if the dust will cover you fast enough to keep the wolves waiting. And in your quieter moments, you hope it will, because in the end you wouldn't survive a day in the Wild West, not because it's too violent, but because it's too slow, too wide, too much space for your thoughts to echo, too many shadows that look like regrets, too many voices asking what you came here to forget, and not enough answers. The railroad passes through now. It didn't used to. There was a time when the only sound across these flats was the breathing of animals and the low scrape of a shovel in dry earth. Now there's the shrill cry of metal on metal, the way it slices. The silence in half like a bad memory cutting its way through a dream. But it doesn't change anything. The train comes and goes, leaving behind the same wind, the same dust, the same brittle light bending across broken fences. People climb aboard thinking they've escaped, but escape isn't real here. The land holds you even after your body's gone. You find a town with no name, just a mark carved into a sign, a triangle, with a line through it. No one explains it. You ride in slow, every step of your horse's hooves sounding like a question. The buildings are too quiet, too well maintained. You see faces in windows, but no one steps out. You tie your horse and step inside what looks like a saloon but smells like a church. No bartender, just a man sitting at the piano playing a single note over and over. He doesn't look up. He just says, "It's already past the hour." And you nod, though you don't know what that means. You leave before the second note plays. You ride hard, fast, as if being seen there too long might make your name vanish from your own mouth. You stop trying to be anything, not good, not brave, not clever, just still. The best survivors are the quiet ones. They nod instead of speak. They sleep in shifts. They count how many matches they have left, even if they haven't lit one in days. They mark time by scars, and when they see someone like you, someone still wondering when the story will shift, when justice or kindness might show up like a rider on the ridge, they don't warn you. They just walk away, because they know. You're still pretending this place works like stories, and you're not ready for the part where it doesn't. Somewhere in the dry hills you find a chapel. No cross. Just a bell made of scrap iron and a door that won't stay shut. Inside it's cool. The floor is stone and at the front there's a bench, not an altar, just a place to sit. There are no prayers here, just a book where people write what they wish they hadn't done. You read a few. "I should have let her go. I should have waited till spring. I should have buried them all together." There are no names, just sentences. You don't write yours, you think about it, but instead you close the book and place a flat stone on top. Then you walk out into the sun, your shadow long and trembling. You never go back. You hear stories, as everyone does, of a place where the water is clean and the ground grows peaches, where no one carries guns and the wind doesn't sound like it's coming for you. They call it Eden, or Whisper Point, or just north. but no one can point to it on a map, and those who claim to have found it speak softly, like they're trying to convince themselves. You consider going, but you don't, because some part of you knows if it's real, it's not meant for you, not anymore. You meet a woman outside a canyon town. She wears all black and carries a satchel of letters, none of them addressed. She tells you she used to write for the paper, back when papers mattered. Now, she just writes to the dead. She says if she stops, they might forget who they were. You ask if she wants company. She says nothing, just tears a page in half and hands it to you. Write what you never said. You sit on a rock and stare at it for an hour, but the words don't come, because you don't remember who you were before the dust got inside your lungs. You hand the page back blank. She doesn't look disappointed, just folds it gently and places tight with the rest and walks on. The stars shift in the west. That's something people forget to tell you. They don't rise the same. They don't move the same. There's a silence between them that stretches wider. You watch them night after night. Then they begin to feel more like cracks than lights. Like the sky is breaking open above you, just slow enough not to notice. Sometimes you whisper names into them. Sometimes they whisper back. Or maybe it's just the wind. But it sounds different when you're tired, like it knows something you forgot. Like it's calling you towards something that doesn't end. You ride past a burned-out stable and find a child sitting in the ash. She doesn't cry. She doesn't look at you. She's holding a coin and turning it over, again and again, like she's flipping fate. You ask where her people are. She points at the smoke, then says, "It's okay. They were tired." You ask what she'll do now. She shrugs. Then, wait for someone who doesn't ask stupid questions. You nod and leave. Not because you're cold, but because she's stronger than you and you know it. By the time your boots wear through, you've stopped counting the days. Time out here isn't measured by numbers. It's measured by what's left behind. A broken buckle, a dented flask. Name someone almost remembered. You don't know what town you're closest to. You don't know how long your horse will last. But you don't feel panic. You just feel the weight of silence pressing evenly against your chest, like a blanket you've gotten used to, like it belongs there. In the Wild West, nothing ends. People vanish, places burn, stories change shape. But endings, they're not part of the design. You just keep riding, keep watching the road for signs that never come. Keep talking less. Keep hoping no one notices you care. Because the moment you care, you become visible. And in the Wild West, visibility is a wound waiting to open. You wouldn't survive a day here, not because you couldn't kill, but because you still believe killing has a reason. Not because you couldn't sleep rough, but because you still think sleep should bring peace. Not because your hands are soft, but because your heart still is. And softness out here is a letter that never reaches its reader. It's a song without words. It's a man standing too long in the doorway thinking he'll be invited in. And out here, no one invites. They just wait to see if you cross the threshold on your own. The Wild West doesn't want heroes. It wants endurance. It wants silence. It wants people who can ride into nothing, become nothing, and stay there. And you still want to be remembered. That's why you wouldn't last, not even until dusk. Somewhere far past the edge of any map, there's a single iron chair in the middle of a dry field. No trail leads to it. No one remembers who put it there. It faces the west, always, where the sun dies every evening in a red pool of dust and flame. People say if you sit in it long enough, you'll remember who you used to be, but no one sits for long, because memories out here aren't kind. They don't arrive like old friends. They come like debt collectors, and they always take something. When they leave, you cross a valley full of bones, not stacked, not scattered, just laid down side by side, as if each one decided its time had come and curled up gently into the dirt. You pass skulls with hats still on them, ribs poking out of the earth like fence posts, a wagon wheel that's more rust than wood, and not a T. Single bird in the sky. It's too quiet. You don't breathe until you're 3 hills past it, and even then your breath tastes like copper. You stop sleeping through the night. You don't mean to. But sleep starts to feel like a gamble. A door you walk through without knowing what's on the other side, so instead you nap, in fits, with your hand always near the saddle, and your mind never fully letting go. You start dreaming with your eyes open, seeing things that may not be there. A lantern in the trees, a man watching from the ridge, your own father sitting by the fire with his boots off, even though he died in Missouri 5 years ago. You don't talk about it, because out here no one asks, was it real? They just ask, did it hurt? And your answer is always the same, not yet. The old cowboy you meet near Ghost Ridge carries a Bible with all the pages torn out, just the cover. That's all he kept. You ask why. He says, only part anyone believes in out here. He walks with a limp and never sits with his back to the door, but he hums when he rides. Low, tuneless hums that sound more like memory than music. You think maybe he's the last person alive who remembers what laughter used to feel like. One night, he saves your life by pointing out a hole in your water skin before it leaks everything into the ground. Next morning, he's gone. No note, no boot prints, just the Bible cover resting where his bedroll used to be. There's a bird that only sings when someone dies. You hear it 3 times in 1 week. The first, when a man fell from a bluff chasing a stray horse. The second, when a woman disappeared from a camp near the river. The third, when you found yourself staring too long into the barrel of your own pistol one cold morning. You didn't pull the trigger, but the bird sang anyway. You never forgot that. And from that point forward, every time you heard it again, you whispered, one word to the wind, not me, not yet. You ride with a group for a while, 3 men, 1 woman. They don't talk much. You ride behind them during the day, watch how they move, how they drink, how they sleep. You never see them smile. At night, you all sit around the fire, and no one shares stories. Just looks that say more than words ever could. One night the woman stands up and walks out of the firelight. She doesn't come back. No one goes looking. No one asks. The next morning, you all ride like she was never there. And somehow that feels worse than death. Eventually the wind starts speaking in patterns. You think maybe it's just the way your ears ring after too many days without real conversation. But then it starts saying things you recognize. Your name. Places you haven't thought about in years. Voices from behind doors you shut long ago. And then one night, as you huddle against a cliff wall for warmth, it whispers, "You're not supposed to be here." And suddenly you know it's right, but there's nowhere else to go. You keep a ledger. It started as a way to track supplies, distances, useful names, but it turns into something else. A list of things you miss. Rain on tin roofs. Fresh bread. Chalk on your fingers. A window that closes without a fight. Smile that doesn't cost anything. You write 1 line every night, and by now the pages are full, not with dates, but with griefs too small for eulogies. Just echoes of who you used to be before the land wore you down to bone and suspicion. In a dry box canyon west of nowhere, you find a garden. It doesn't make sense. Flowers, real ones, growing from the cracked earth. A few vegetables. A carved stone fountain with no water but clean hands marks on the edges. There's no house, no tools, just the garden. You kneel and touch the soil. It's warm, alive. You don't take anything, not a petal, not a leaf, just the knowledge that somehow, someone tried to make beauty here. And for once the land let them. Sometimes at night you talk aloud to no one, just to hear a voice. You tell stories you've already told. You hum songs you forgot the lyrics to. You apologize to people you left behind, no one hears. But that's not the point. It's not about being heard. It's about remembering your mouth can still form human words, that your tongue hasn't turned entirely to sand and salt. At the end of the trail, if there is one, you don't find gold or peace. You find a fire still burning with no one around it, a chair facing the stars, a single cup. You sit, you drink, and you realize the Wild West didn't want to kill you. It wanted to show you what happens when the world stops pretending it owes you anything. No plot, no meaning, just space-time, and silence wide enough to swallow who you were and leave behind only what the land can use, because you wouldn't survive a day in the Wild West. Not because it's cruel, but because it's patient, and patience wears you out more than pain. Patience turns your name into an echo, your dreams into dust, your fears into routine, and by the time you realize it, the day has already passed, and you didn't survive. You became it. There's a canyon they call Hollow Pass. You won't find it on maps, and if you ask for directions, most folks will look away. Not out of fear, out of respect. The pass doesn't kill you with cliffs or outlaws. It does something worse. It makes you forget where you were going. You ride in with a goal, a name, a destination stitched into your ribs. But somewhere along the winding edges, after the 6th bend, maybe the 7th, you stop remembering why you came. Your horse keeps walking, but your thoughts thin out, like smoke on dry wind. You forget the name of your mother. You forget how old you are. You forget what it felt like to have a future. And by the time you reach the other side, all that's left is a man who understands the land but no longer understands himself. And still, you keep riding. In a dead orchard, bare trees like black veins, you find a mirror nailed to a post. It's cracked, tilted, and catches only part of your face. But that's enough. You stare. For too long, you don't recognize the eyes. Not because they're hardened or hollow, but because they're still hoping, and that makes no sense. Out here, hope is the first thing the land eats, like sugar melting in heat. You look away before it breaks you, and never look in another mirror again. You meet a man with teeth made of copper. He claims he used to be a preacher. Now he sells riddles for bullets. You trade him 2 rounds and ask him what the West really is. He spits into the dirt and says, "It's a fire that doesn't care what you throw into it." Then he smiles, and you notice none of the teeth are real. He didn't lose them to violence, he gave them away, one for each secret he no longer needed. You ride with another group for a while, strangers, quiet, tough-eyed, no introductions. You just nod and they nod back. It works until one night a storm rolls in fast and brutal, and one of the men refuses to stop for shelter. He says, "The rain knows what I did." No one argues. He rides on. The rest of you hunker down under a bluff, listening to the sky rip open. When morning comes, he's not dead, but something's different. He doesn't speak, doesn't eat, just stares. And 3 days later, he walks into the desert barefoot and never comes back. You never learn his name, and you don't want to. Once, in the middle of a windless plain, you come upon a post stuck deep into the earth. At the top is a pair of boots, soles up. Someone's way of marking a grave, maybe. Or maybe it's a warning. Or maybe it's a joke the West plays on itself, some absurd monument to futility. Either way, you sit by it and eat what's left of your jerky. And for a full hour, you pretend you're not alone. You imagine the boots belong to a friend. You imagine their voice, their laugh, the story they told that made you laugh so hard dust came out of your nose. But when the hour ends, the wind picks up, and you ride on. Because ghosts aren't company, they're just weight. Your hands stop looking like your own, calloused in new places, fingernails chipped from gripping reins, rocks, rope. The skin under your wrists is darker now, like leather that's been hung too close to a fire. You try to remember the last time someone held your hand, really held it, not out of fear or transaction, but because they wanted to feel if. Your pulse matched theirs. It was years ago, before the dust claimed your voice, before your fingers forgot how to reach back. Now, when someone touches you, even by accident, you flinch, not out of pain, out of memory. A woman in a green dress stops you in a town where the dogs don't bark. She doesn't ask who you are. She just says, "Are you here to bury something or dig it up?" You don't answer, because you don't know. She nods as if she expected that. Then she points to the edge of town where the ground is softer. "I left something out there," she says. "If you find it, don't bring it back." She disappears into the saloon. You never see her again. But sometimes you dream of her standing at the edge of the firelight, watching you, not judging, just waiting. People out here mark time by losses. How long ago did the river dry? 2 sons. How long since the blacksmith vanished? Half a wife, no one counts in months or years, just griefs. Each one a notch on the belt, a crack in the wood, a change in the way someone says your name. You carry yours the way everyone does, silently, heavily, without ceremony. Because mourning isn't a ritual out here, it's a habit. Eventually, you come to a place where the road splits. One path is narrow, full of thorns leading into the hills. The other is wide, dusty, easy. You don't hesitate. You take the narrow one. Not because you're brave, but because easy things don't last, and you've come too far to be fooled by comfort. The thorns tear your coat. The rocks bruise your horse's hooves. You don't care. Pain is just proof that you're still a body. And for now, being a body is enough. You pass through a ghost town where every building is still intact. Chairs at tables, plates with dust, cards on a bar, but no people. Not a single one. It's like they stood up all at once and walked into the wind. You sleep in the schoolhouse. The blackboard still says tomorrow geography. In the middle of the night, the bell rings once. You don't ask why, you just leave before sunrise. The West doesn't take your life quickly. It doesn't drag you into horror. It just rubs at the edges, filing away your hope, your noise, your history, until all that's left is the part of you that listens, that notices wind direction, that watches the way crows land, that reads silence like scripture. You become less of a person and more of a shape that moves through dust, drinks when it must, and only speaks when there's something worth saying, which is rare. And by now, if you've lasted this long, you understand. You didn't survive a day in the Wild West. You didn't outwit it. You didn't overcome it. You became it, a piece of the land, a silence that remembers, a shadow that doesn't beg to be seen. And if you disappeared today, no one would carve your name. They'd just watch the dust settle where you once stood and nod, as if the wind had finally done what it always promised to do. You cross a bridge that shouldn't still be standing. Wood splintered grey by 100 summers, rope worn thin as whispers. It sways beneath you with every breath your horse takes. There's a sign nailed to the first post, faded, illegible. But someone carved fresh letters beneath it, shaky, uneven. Don't cross unless you've already lost something. You think about turning back, but you don't. because you did lose something a long time ago, though you're not sure what it was anymore, only that your chest feels lighter in the wrong places. The bridge holds, but on the other side, the world is different, not visibly. Same scrub grass, same gold light flattening the hills, but it feels thinner, less real, like a place that doesn't want to be remembered. You ride slower. Your horse starts to look at shadows like they're watching back. You hear your own voice echo when you speak, though you haven't said anything aloud in days. The wind moves differently. It doesn't push, it pulls. You find a town built in a circle, all the buildings facing inward. No saloon, no church, just 20 doors and one stone well in the middle. You approach the well and peer inside. No water, just a mirror nailed to the far wall 10 feet down, reflecting your face back up at you. But it's not quite your face, it's older, eyes deeper set. A scar you don't have, yet you step back and no one greets you. So you don't stay. You pass a tree with boots hanging from its branches. Not just one pair, dozens, worn, cracked, coated in dust. Each pair tied together by the laces and slung like offerings. There's no one around, no tracks leading up to it. You take your hat off as you ride by, though you don't know why. Somehow it feels like the only decent thing you've done in weeks, maybe months. In the hills you spot smoke, you follow it, not because you're hopeful, but because it's the first thing that moved in days. At the source is a man with a kettle, boiling something that smells like pine and pepper. He nods at you, gestures for you to sit. You do. You don't talk for an hour. Then he says, "I came out here to disappear." You nod. He continues, "But then I realize disappearing only works if you forget yourself too." You both watch the fire. Eventually he adds, "I haven't managed that part yet." And you understand, because neither have you. One night, you see lights far off on the ridge, lanterns swaying gently, figures moving, too far to see clearly. But the shape of it, soft, golden, slow, it looks like a wedding. You haven't seen one in years. Not since the one you left before vows. You sit and watch from a distance, and as you do, a strange ache builds in your jaw. You realize it's from smiling. You hadn't felt your face bend like that in too long. It hurts. But you keep watching until the lights vanish, and you sleep better that night than you have in months. The next morning, a coyote trots past your camp. It doesn't flinch when it sees you, just stares. Then it sits, tilts its head, as if waiting. You throw it a strip of dried meat. It sniffs it, then walks away, leaves it behind. That's the moment you realize something important out here. Not even hunger is predictable. Later you come upon a grave, small, fresh, no stone, just a circle of blackened sage. At the center is a single copper coin, not for payment, not for tradition, just left there like a question. You don't take it, but you do kneel, and you don't know why. In a canyon full of broken windmills, the air doesn't move. Blades creak when you walk past, not because the wind stirs them, but because they remember. There's a post here with a list carved into it. Anna, 1871. Thomas, 1872. The mule, 1873. Silence. 1875, you stare at that last one longest, and then you whisper it to yourself. And then, for reasons you'll never fully understand, you add your own name beneath it. You ride with a stranger who wears gloves even when he sleeps. You never see his hands. He carries a harmonica but never plays it, just holds it sometimes, like it helps him breathe. He tells you, out here, stories aren't told. They're carried. You ask what his is. He says, the kind that ends in someone else's mouth. And you don't ask again, because that's how the West teaches you once. As you ride further west, the ground changes. Redder, hotter, less grass, more stone. You follow a dry riverbed for 3 days. It never bends. You begin to suspect it was never a river at all, just a scar in the land, pretending it used to carry something. Like you, like all of us. You find a child sitting cross-legged by a circle of stones, alone. He doesn't cry, doesn't speak. You ask where his parents are. He points to the sky, then shrugs. You ask if he's hungry. He nods. You give him bread. He eats half, hands you the rest. Later that night you sleep with your arm around him, and for the first time in years you dream of your own childhood. But in the dream, your face is missing. You wake with the boy gone, but the rest of the bread still there, at Issy. The base of a butte, someone has carved a single sentence into the rock. The West does not forgive, but it does forget. You touch the words with your fingertips and wonder which one you fear more. Eventually, the silence inside you grows larger than the sky. You stop speaking even to yourself. You no longer hum, no longer count steps. You simply move, like wind through grass, like an echo returning home. And though no one sees it happen, you cross a line. Not marked by signs or fences, just a shift, in posture, in breath, in the way the land no longer resists you because you've become part of it, and it no longer notices you're there. There's a town carved into a canyon wall. You'd miss it if the sun hit wrong. It isn't marked on any maps, and the trail that leads to it is more rumor than road. But you find it, not by looking, by drifting. The people there don't speak, not out of silence or custom, but because no one has a voice left. They greet each other with gestures, 2 fingers across the heart for I remember, a slow blink for I'm listening, and a raised palm when something must be buried. You try to speak once. They don't stop you. They just look at you as if your words are costing you more than you understand. So you stop, and after a while, you begin to learn their language. Not with the mouth, with the space between movements. In the canyon town, every wall has writing scratched into the stone, not graffiti, not names, sentences, thoughts. I almost turned back. It didn't rain the year my brother died. She said the wind wasn't real. They're everywhere. The walls are soft with memory, and you realize that the town isn't built of stone and timber. It's built of forgetting. People come here when they need to lose something. Guilt, grief, their past name. Some leave. Some stay. You stay 3 days. On the 4th, you wake up and can't remember why you came. That's when you know it's time to leave. As you climb out of the canyon, a man offers you water. You accept. He watches the way you drink, then says, "You've been here long enough to bleed into the dust. Careful now, it'll keep pieces of you." You nod. He asks you your name. You give it. He writes it down on a stone, sets it next to hundreds of others. You don't protest, because names are just anchors, and you're tired of sinking. The desert beyond is the kind where time dissolves. The Tash sun rides low and mean. Your horse becomes your only companion. You stop talking to it. You just think at it. And maybe in the stillness it thinks back. One day it stops walking, not from pain, just stillness. You sit beside it for hours. When you finally rise, you walk without looking back, because looking back means wanting something, to return. And the West doesn't return what it takes. You find shelter in the shell of a mail station. The walls are cracked, but the roof holds. There's a ledger under a broken desk, pages worn but legible. Instead of delivery records, it's filled with confessions. Lines like, "I told her I'd be back. He never read the letter. I stole the boots from a dying man." And last, "I never meant to become part of the silence." You sit there all night, not writing, just remembering all the things you've never said aloud. In the morning, a sandstorm rises without warning. The world vanishes in beige chaos. You press yourself against a ruined wall, eyes wrapped, mouth closed. For hours, you feel nothing but grit and heartbeat. And somewhere in that storm, something shifts. When the dust finally settles, you're alone again. But not the same. Lighter. Hollowed, like a lantern with the wick burned out. Still shaped like what it was, but no longer lit. You meet a woman who carries bones in a cloth sack. She says they belong to someone who never had a grave. Now she carries him until she finds where he's supposed to rest. She doesn't ask your story, just offers you a piece of dry fruit and says, "Most men out here die by thirst of the soul, not the mouth." You travel together a while, then part without words because out here goodbyes don't echo. There's a myth about a town that sleeps. Not one that died, not one that vanished, but one that sleeps. Every few years, someone stumbles upon it. Doors shut, lanterns burning low, tables set. They say if you breathe too loud, the town exhales back. You never find it. But you do dream of it. A place where no one needs to run anymore, where guns rust and names fade without guilt. And sometimes, you wonder if you're dreaming now, and if waking up would hurt more than staying. Lost. In a dry creek bed, you find a rusted revolver. 6 chambers, 3 bullets. You don't need it, but you take it. Not for defense, not for justice. Just to remember what power used to feel like. You keep it wrapped in cloth, buried deep in your pack. You never fire it, but you clean it every few weeks because some rituals outlast their reasons. You follow a trail of hoofprints that don't belong to any horse you've seen. Too wide, too deep. They lead into a canyon that smells of blood and sage. You don't follow them all the way in. Not because you're scared, but because you've learned to listen when the land says, "This isn't your story." One evening, beneath a sky smeared with ash and violet, you find a cabin still standing. Inside, a table set for 2, plates clean, cups dry, a single boot by the door, and a journal on the bed. The last entry, "I thought the West would end when I stopped walking. But I was wrong. It ends when no one remembers what the road looked like." You close the book. You don't stay. Because rest is dangerous when it feels too easy. You reach a high ridge and see nothing but flatness on all sides. No towns, no fire smoke, no paths, just endless earth and sky. You sit. Watch the stars blink into being. And for a moment you think this is the whole point. Not gold, not revenge, not legend, just this. Being small beneath something that never needed you, and feeling okay about it. There's a patch of land no bigger than a kitchen table where grass still grows green. You don't find it on purpose. You stumble onto it chasing a noise you never identify. In the middle of it stands a chair, just a plain wooden thing. Worn, sun-bleached and wrong somehow. You don't sit, you just stare at it, and after a while you feel something strange, warmth behind your ribs, like someone is remembering you. But when you blink, it's gone. The grass is still there, but now it's brown, and the chair is on its side, and the air smells like something ended. You meet a man with no ears. They weren't cut off. He says he gave them up said they were too full of things he didn't want to hear again. Now he walks with a piece of charcoal and a slate tied around his neck, writes his thoughts in short bursts. He asks your name. You tell him. He writes, "Keep it soft." You may not want to hear it shouted later. Then he wipes the slate clean. You wake one morning to find a circle of stones arranged around your sleeping body. You don't remember making them. No footprints but yours. No signs of disturbance. Just stones. Deliberate, equal in spacing. You stand. Up slowly, afraid to break something sacred you didn't mean to create. You wait for something, wind, a voice, a judgment. But all that comes is silence. So you pack your things and move on, but you glance over your shoulder 4 times that day and sleep poorly for many more. In the center of a dried lake bed, someone has placed a dollhouse, perfectly intact, painted. Dusted, windows still with glass. There's no trail leading to it, no footsteps, just this tiny home defying every law of the land. You walk around it twice before you kneel. Inside are tiny chairs, a table, 2 beds, a hearth made of clay and matchsticks. Everything's just so. You stay an hour, maybe more, and when you leave, you place a smooth stone on the roof. No one told you to, but it feels right, like signing a guest book at the edge of a dream. The next town you find is full of wind chimes. They hang from windows, porches, even fence posts. No 2 sound alike. They ring in constant argument with the breeze. The townsfolk are kind but distant. They speak in half phrases, and never after dark. You ask why. They shake their heads. That night, you hear a chime that doesn't stop, just one high and hollow. It keeps ringing until sunrise, and then you realize no wind ever blew. You leave before breakfast. There's a canyon people call the library, not because of books, but because every surface is carved with names, dates, stories, layers deep, dozens, hundreds, each telling the same thing in different voices. I was here. I made it this far. Please remember me. You take out your knife, but you don't carve anything. You just press the blade gently into the stone. Not enough to scar, just enough to let the rock feel your presence. Then you leave, letting silence be your only trace. You find a man who's been following you, not close, not fast, just always behind. You spot him on ridges, down valleys, at the edges of campfire glow. One day you wait. He approaches, doesn't speak, just sits across from you. You offer him food. He declines. After a long while, he nods once, says, "Just wanted to see if you'd make it further than I did." Then he stands and walks the other way. You never see him again, but sometimes in dreams you feel him watching, and not unkindly. You come to a tree with knives hammered into the bark, dozens of them, big ones, small ones, broken, clean, each blade, rusted deep into the trunk. The tree's still alive, thriving even. You ask a nearby traveler what it means. He says, "Some folks leave their vengeance here, so they don't carry it forward." You don't have vengeance, not anymore, but you still place your blade among the rest and feel your hands grow lighter. You pass an abandoned farm where the fences are too straight, too perfect. You ride slow. Something about it feels held, watched. The barn door creaks in a wind you don't feel. You don't go in. You don't need to. Because some stories are so loud, they echo without a sound. You just nod once and ride on. There's a woman with a scar that runs from her eyebrow to her collarbone. She tends a small grove of dead trees, washes each trunk every morning, sings to them at night. You ask what she's doing. She says, "Remembering how to love something that doesn't bloom." You offer to help. She shakes her head, smiles, They only listen to loss. You spend 3 days without food, 2 without water. Your skin tightens, your thoughts dry out. You think you might be disappearing. But then it rains, just for a moment. Enough to stain your shirt, enough to remind your body what it used to crave. You laugh, once. It sounds like something cracking. And when it stops, you feel your pulse again, just barely. But it's there. You reach the base of a mountain with a staircase carved into its side. Each step has a name, thousands of them. Some familiar, most not. You climb for hours, not to reach the top, but to see where your name might be. When you find it halfway up, it's misspelled, but still yours. You sit beside it until the sun falls. Then you descend. Because this mountain it's about conquering. It's about being counted and knowing the count will go on without you. You meet a girl who sells shadows. She holds them in jars, glass tinted with ash. Says they're from people who forgot themselves. You ask what they do. She shrugs. Depends on what you're missing. You buy one. You never open it, but you keep it in your pack. Because sometimes knowing you're carrying something invisible is the only proof you exist at all. There's a bridge made of bones. You don't believe it at first, not because it's impossible, but because it's too quiet, too elegant. The bones are bleached and arranged perfectly, woven together like wicker, clean of all trace. You stand at the edge and notice small carvings on the ribs beneath your boots. Walk lightly. Only the forgotten may cross. Weight is more than the body. You think about turning back, but you've come too far. You step onto the first plank. It creaks but holds. You don't breathe until you reach the other side. When you do, the wind changes and your name feels heavier. The plains ahead are not endless, but they feel like they are. There's no landmark, no shade, no sound but your horse's breath and the slow thud of hooves on sand, too fine to hold memory. You start counting. Steps, then seconds, then thoughts, eventually all numbers blur into one. Time slows, then breaks, and for a long stretch, you move through nothing but stillness. No hunger, no thirst, just the illusion of forward. In the center of the emptiness, you find a clock. It stands 10 feet high, made of rusted iron and glass, its hands frozen at 2:47. You don't ask why. You just sit beneath it, letting your shadow touch its base. Eventually, an old man appears, pulling a cart of melted candles. He doesn't speak, just takes a small white taper and places it at the base of the clock, lights it, then leaves. The flame burns steady in the wind, and you realize it's not time that's broken out here. It's memory. You sleep one night beneath a sky so black it feels like ink. No stars, no moon, no shape to the dark. And yet, you dream of light. Not the kind you see, the kind you remember. A hand reaching for yours across a long table. A laugh that shook your ribs. The smell of something baking. When you wake, there's nothing around you. No tracks, no sign of fire, but your hands feel warmer, as if someone held them in the dream and forgot to let go. There's a shack with a piano in it, no walls left, just the frame. The keys are broken, scattered in the dust, but the strings are still there. You strum them softly. They don't sing, they whisper. You think you hear a song you once knew, something sung to you as a child. You hum along off-key, and for the first time in days your throat doesn't hurt. A trader offers you something strange, a bag filled with silence. He claims it was bottled from a night so quiet, even. The stars refuse to blink. He warns you, don't open it unless you're ready to forget what sound feels like. You take it. You don't open it, but you carry it, because you know there will come a day when even silence will feel loud. A woman rides beside you for a while. She doesn't smile, doesn't speak, but you match pace. The rhythm is enough. At night, you share a fire and watch it flicker low. On the third night, she finally says, "I used to think I was lost." You glance at her. She stares into the flame. Then I realized you can't be lost if you were never going anywhere. She leaves before dawn. No goodbye. Just her canteen left full beside your bedroll. You walk into a dry riverbed and see a child drawing in the dust with a stick. She draws eyes. Only eyes. Hundreds. Some open, some shut. She doesn't look up. You ask her what she's doing. She says, "Trying to remember what people looked like." You offer her water. She nods, but never stops drawing. You find a coat nailed to a tree. No note, no name, pockets filled with seeds. You take the seeds. You scatter them as you walk. You never expect them to grow, but something in you needs to believe. They might, even if it takes 100 years, even if no one's there to see. There's a place where the land hums, not loud, not rhythmic, just a low, endless vibration. You feel it in your boots, your teeth, your ribs. You camp there for a night. Sleep comes hard. Dreams come harder. You wake up gripping your own name like it's a knife. And when you whisper it aloud, the ground hums louder. You leave, and promise not to return. In a ravine you find hundreds of shoes, laid side by side, all sizes, all styles, children's, women's, men's, not thrown, not buried, placed, each pair facing north. You don't ask why. You take your boots off, place them down and walk barefoot for a while. The ground cuts you, but you don't bleed much because the West has already taken most of your softness, and your soles grow tougher with every step. You pass a man building a house with no walls, just a roof, 4 corners marked by stones. You ask him what he's doing. He says, "Giving the sky a place to stay when it gets tired." You ask if he'll finish it. He says, "Only if the stars promise not to leave." You don't laugh, because you understand. Sometimes the only thing worth building is a shelter for the things that can't be held. There's a moment near dusk when the horizon folds, not literally, but it looks like the land bends into itself, like a letter half written. You stop and stare, and you wonder if the West is trying to write you down, not as a hero, not as a myth, just as a sentence. Incomplete. Waiting. You take out your journal, tear a page, and let it blow into the wind. You hope it lands somewhere it can be read or buried. You ride through a canyon where the walls are black with soot, but there's no sign of fire, no trees charred, no ash on the wind, only the smell of something old and hollow, like paper left too close to a flame. There are handprints on the rock, small. One's children's too high to reach, too many to count. You press your palm against one, it fits almost, and for a moment you feel heat that isn't there. Further in you find a table set in the middle of nowhere. Wood-bowed, silverware tarnished. 2 plates, 2 chairs. No food, just a cracked mug with dried flowers inside. You sit, because you're tired, because the world seems to want you to. As you rest your hands on the table, a breeze moves past, not across your face, but inside your chest. You look down and find a note beneath the plate. You've already been here. You just don't remember the leaving. You don't take the note. You leave it for the next traveler, whoever they may be. You sleep one night beside a pond, so still it reflects not just the sky, but your thoughts. You stare at it too long. Long enough to see versions of yourself you forgot you ever were. A boy with muddy hands, a soldier with tired eyes, a friend who said the wrong thing at the right time. You almost speak to your reflection. Almost. But the water ripples before you can. And when it stills again, you're alone, just you, the version that made it this far. At the edge of a dry orchard, a scarecrow waves at you, not because of the wind, but because the arm was tied loose. You stop. Nod at it. It doesn't move again, but for a while you imagine it watching you, not with malice, with pity, because even straw can recognize someone out of place. A sign on the trail reads, "This way leads to no one." But go ahead. You follow it, not out of curiosity, but because it's the first honest thing you've read in weeks. The trail loops, twists, fades, returns. Eventually you forget you're following a path at all. You're just moving. And maybe that's all survival ever was. You meet a man who plays music on bottles filled with sand, each one tuned to a different silence. He doesn't perform, just plays for the dirt. You ask him why. He shrugs. Even the dead need a little something to hum to. You sit beside him, you don't talk. And when you leave, the silence sounds different, like it's been stirred. A child offers you a rock. You take it. It's warm, not from the sun, from something older. You hold it to your ear and swear you hear breathing. The child giggles, says, "That one remembers when this land had trees." You ask her name. She says, "I forget it sometimes, but the rock remembers me." You keep the rock. You forget the child's face by morning, but not her voice. You stumble into a dust storm with no wind, just a wall of brown that wraps around you, like cloth. You walk until your legs ache, then keep walking because stopping feels worse. When you emerge, your clothes are heavier, your face rougher, but your thoughts quieter, like the storm pulled something out of your head and didn't give it back. You never find out what it was, but you miss it, a little. You reach a crossroads with no signs, just shoes, pairs of boots, sandals, even slippers, lined neatly at each branch of the fork, hundreds of them. All worn, all waiting, you place your own boots there, then pick a path barefoot. Not because you're brave, but because you've run out of ways to choose. There's a woman who sits by the road holding a mirror. She doesn't speak, doesn't move, just holds it up to whoever passes. When you look into it, you don't see yourself. You see a place you've never been. A porch in rain, a bed with white sheets, a dog asleep on a rug, the kind of life that hums instead of burns. You stare too long. She lowers the mirror, and the image vanishes. You want to ask her where that place is, but your throat closes up, so you ride on. A man offers to trade you a story, not for goods, for silence. You agree. He tells you about a town where no one dies, but everyone forgets. He lived there once. Said his mother became a stranger by his 4th birthday. By his 10th, he didn't know his own voice. So he left. But part of him stayed behind, still waving from the porch, still waiting to be remembered. You don't say anything. He nods. The trade is complete. You see a field filled with hats. Just hats, dozens of them, cowboy, bowler, wide-brimmed, dusty and sun-faded. They lie in neat rows like headstones. A woman walks among them barefoot, watering them with a copper can. You ask her what she's doing. She says, "Hats remember better than people." Then she tips hers to you and disappears into the fog. You pass a tree that whispers your name, not in sound, but in memory. The way the leaves tilt as you pass, the way the shadows bend, the way something in your chest pauses. You stop and look at it for a long time. The bark is scarred, smooth in places where hands once rested, scratched in places where knives told secrets. You don't carve anything. You just press your fingers to the trunk and feel the ache of all the names that never got spoken aloud. Man sells maps of places that no longer exist. He lays them out on a ragged quilt beside the road. Towns burned out, railroads never built, rivers dried before they made it to the sea. You buy one with the last coin in your pocket. It's labeled, "Somewhere you thought you'd be by now." You fold it carefully and tuck it under your shirt, because some directions aren't for travel. They're just reminders that you used to believe in arrival. At dusk, you find a windmill spinning with no wind. Its blades creak like old bones turning in restless sleep. No house nearby, no well beneath it, just this tower standing like a forgotten monument. You sit and watch it turn until the stars come out, and as it spins, you swear the rhythm matches your pulse. For a while, it feels like someone is counting you, breath by breath, as if the sky still knows you're here. You find a letter nailed to a fence post. The paper is yellowed, curled at the edges, ink faded. It reads, "If you find this, I want you to know I didn't mean to disappear." I just followed the silence until it stopped asking questions. You fold it once, then bury it beneath a rock, because not every message needs a reply. Some just need to rest. You walk into a town with no center, buildings scattered like dice on a table, every door open, every window dark. You call out, no one answers, but you can feel the eyes, not watching out of fear, just watching, like the town is waiting to be remembered. You sit on a porch, light a candle, and for a few hours, you pretend it's home. You leave before sunrise, because pretending is the most dangerous comfort, and the West has no room for comfort that lingers. A boy offers to trade you a laugh. You ask him what he wants in return. He says, "A truth you haven't told yourself yet." You pause, you tell him, "I'm not sure who I was before this land started stripping me down." He nods, then laughs, a wild, beautiful sound that startles a bird from a nearby cactus. You carry that sound for days, even after you forget the boy's face. There's a mailbox in the middle of nowhere, paint chipped, flag rusted. You open it. Inside, a stack of letters addressed only to you. You read one. It says, "I hope you found what wasn't looking for you." Another says, "Stop trying to carry every goodbye." Some are meant to be dropped. You don't take the letters. You don't leave one. But when you walk away, your shoulders feel just a little lighter. You pass a man planting buttons, all sizes, colors, some with thread still attached. You ask him why. He says, "Every button comes from a story someone couldn't keep closed." You kneel beside him, place one from your coat into the soil. You don't ask what will grow, you just hope it doesn't need water, because you're running low again. At night, you dream of a door with no building around it. It opens, and inside is every version of you that turned back. You don't speak, they don't move, but you feel them watching you, disappointed maybe. Relieved, definitely. When you wake, your boots are turned the wrong way. You put them back on and keep walking. You find a burned wagon beside a dry creek. No sign of struggle, no bones, just a child's doll, perfectly clean, resting atop the ashes. You stare at it too long. Then you set it gently in the sand and cover it with your scarf. A burial, of sorts. Not for a body, but for the idea that someone made it out. You reach a ridge overlooking nothing, just horizon swallowing itself. You sit there for hours, waiting for something, an animal, a cloud, a thought. Eventually you realize this is the end of a road you never meant to take. Not the kind that loops, not the kind that teaches, just the kind that finishes. You stand, you walk, and the ground begins again beneath your feet. There's a mirror buried halfway in the desert, half glinting in the low sun, like the last truth that refused to stay underground. You almost miss it. You kneel beside it, brush the sand from its glass. The frame is cracked, the silver backing, warped with time, but the reflection is clear. You see yourself only slightly thinner, wilder, the color drained from your cheeks, the corners of your eyes tight with things you've seen and swallowed. But more than that, you see the shape you've become. Not a hero, not a ghost, just someone who kept walking when it stopped making sense. You think about smashing the mirror, but you don't. You cover it back up with sand. Some truths belong half-buried. A woman rides past you humming a song without words. You know the melody. You don't know how. It winds through the evening like smoke from an unseen fire, looping, lilting, then drifting into silence. You catch up to her just once, long enough to ask, "Where did you learn that?" She smiles, teeth crooked but kind. "Same place you forgot it." Then she spurs her horse and vanishes into the heat shimmer, and for the next 2 nights you hum that song to yourself, softly, like holding a memory that might fly away if you hold too tight. There's a barn where time has stopped, literally. The clocks on the walls are all frozen at 4:17. The sun outside never moves from the horizon. Inside, dust floats like it's suspended in honey. No sound, no breeze. You step through slowly, like walking underwater. Your boot prints are the first in decades, or maybe in minutes. A man sits in a rocking chair, unmoving. His eyes blink once as you pass. You ask, "Is this the end?" He doesn't answer. He just rocks forward and then back, and the clocks tick once, then stop again. You leave before the chair creaks a second time. A child draws circles in the dust with a bone, each one bigger than the last. You watch from a distance. He doesn't acknowledge you, doesn't speak, just draws. Eventually, he stands, looks at his work, says, "That's the size of the world I used to believe in," then walks away. You don't follow, because some things shrink when chased. In a dry riverbed you find a bell tied to a stick. It doesn't ring in the wind, but when you touch it, it sings. Soft, clear, low, like the kind of sound that only happens when you forget you're listening. A woman nearby whispers, "That bell knows who's still looking for home," you ask, "And if no one rings it again?" She says, "Then maybe the home forgets them too." You leave it hanging. Some doors don't need knocking on, they just need to stay closed. There's a wooden plank nailed to a cactus. Someone carved, "I lied when I said I was okay, but the land was too wide to explain it." You stare at it longer than you should, then keep walking. Not because you're okay, but because you don't know how to answer either. At a dry crossroads, an old man sits on a crate offering spoons. Each one is different. Worn handles, bent bowls. He tells you to pick one. You ask why. He says, "Because when you finally sit down for a meal that matters, you'll want something that remembers how you got there." You pick the simplest one. No decoration, just metal worn smooth from too many hands. He nods and says, "You'll eat again." It sounds like a promise, but feels like a warning. You find a book with all the pages torn out. On the inside cover, someone wrote, "The story wasn't mine. I just carried the weight." You hold it for a while, then leave it open on a stump, letting the wind flip its blank pages like the world's softest thunder. A dog follows you for 3 days. You never see it, but you hear the pause, hear the panting, feel the eyes. You leave food once, it disappears. You call out once, no reply. On the 4th day, it's gone. And somehow the silence feels colder. Like you lost something that was never yours but still loved you for a moment. You walk into a clearing where hundreds of campfires once burned. The ashes form a spiral. You step into the center and sit. And it feels like every ghost who ever cooked beans here is sitting just beyond your sight. You whisper, "I made it." Not because anyone asked, just because you needed to hear it. And the ashes seem to sigh. A woman teaches you how to track time using the wind. She says the gusts follow a pattern. Strong at dusk, sharp at dawn, missing when something is wrong. You ask how long she's been out here. She says, "Since I stopped waiting for someone to come with me." You nod. That makes sense. The West doesn't come with companions, it only offers echoes. You wake one morning to find words written on your chest in dust. Keep going. You're almost where you'll stop caring. You don't wipe them off. Not. Yet you ride half the day before rain does it for you, and it feels like a baptism, if baptisms made you lonelier, but lighter. You pass a fence with no posts, just wire strung across nothing, sagging in the wind, humming softly like the leftover breath of something long gone. You don't step over it, you walk beside it. For hours. Like it might lead somewhere, or end. It never does. Eventually you stop and rest against it, letting the wire press gently into your back like a memory trying to hold you still. There's a house with no walls, only a floor. Swept clean. A lantern sits in the middle, lit. No one around. You sit beside it. It smells like cedar. You whisper something you didn't know you still remembered. The flame leans toward you, then stills. You stay until it burns out. Because some things deserve to be watched until the end, even if they were never yours. In a field of sagebrush, you come across a pair of gloves nailed to a tree. Inside one, a note. "I stopped feeling things. These didn't help." You take them down, not to wear, just to hold. And you think of all the times you reached for warmth and found bark, wind, dust. You set them gently at the base of the tree and walk on, because some burdens aren't yours, and some hands need to stay. There you reach a stream with no water, but the stones are wet, still glistening, still cold. You follow the dry riverbed, your boots crunching on bones that aren't bones, just shells of insects, seeds, pebbles worn down into shapes that might once have had names. At the bend, someone has placed a cup, empty, facing upstream. You leave a second beside it, also empty. Because sometimes it's not about quenching thirst. It's about saying, "I was here too." There's a bell tower with no bell, a ladder missing every third rung. You climb it anyway. At the top there's nothing, just air. And the sound of everything you haven't said, echoing in your ears like it came from below, not within. You sit there for a while, then climb down slower than you went up, and when your boots hit dirt again, the sky looks less blue, and more like skin pulled tight over something unfinished. You meet a man who lives inside a circle, drawn in chalk. He hasn't left it in years. He tells you he drew it on the day he stopped trusting distance. You ask him what's kept him alive. He says, "Hope and squirrels." You laugh. He doesn't. He tells you, "You'll draw your own. Circle soon. Everyone does, just pray it's wide enough to hold everything you'll miss." You thank him and keep walking, though for the next 3 nights you feel your boots carving invisible lines wherever you camp. A town lets you in, but not fully. The inn has no beds. The saloon has no bottles. The church has no door. People nod at you but don't speak. One child tugs at your sleeve, whispers, "You're not here yet," then runs off. You try to leave, but the road vanishes. Only when you stop trying does it return, and you walk backward out of town, not looking behind you, just listening to the hush grow louder. You find a coin with no face, no heads, no tails, just smooth metal worn clean by choices never made. You flip it. It makes no sound, but something in you shifts. You don't know if it was yes or no, but you keep going. Because forward is the only direction that doesn't ask questions. In a canyon choked with wind, you find words carved into stone. I was loved once, but not here. You press your hand to the letters. The stone is warm, you whisper, same, it doesn't echo, but the wind slows just enough for you to hear your own breath. And remember how quiet grief can be when it finally stops asking for company. A man paints signs that point in every direction but north. Each one reads the same thing. You're almost where you'll stop pretending. You ask him why no north. He says, that's the direction truth walks alone. You don't ask what's waiting there, because you already know it's not a place, it's a version of yourself you're not ready to meet. You lose your shadow for 2 days. You look for it in mirrors, in campfire light, beneath the sharp edge. Of noon, nothing. You start to feel lighter, then wrong. When it returns, it's slightly off, leaning when you don't, twitching when you're still. You don't ask it where it went. You just nod and keep walking, because the West borrows parts of you sometimes and gives them back stranger. In a dry garden, a woman teaches dead plants how to grow. She speaks softly to stems that haven't stood in years, waters roots that crumbled in the last storm. You ask her why. She says, because maybe one day the soil will remember. You ask her if that's ever worked. She says, not yet. But she keeps going, and you help. Not because you believe, but because it's the closest thing to prayer the land will let you have. You come across a stranger building a staircase into the sky, no support, just floating steps made of scrap metal and rope. You ask where it leads. He shrugs. Maybe nowhere. You ask why build it. He says, because maybe someone will need it. One day. You offer a nail. He thanks you. You don't climb it, but you watch it sway against the stars, and it feels like something holy, or foolish, or both. As the final ridge comes into view, there's nothing dramatic waiting. No town, no ruin, no marker. Just wind and light, and the long flat silence that has followed you like a dog with no name. You sit down. Your legs ache. Your face is cracked with sun and sleep and dust. You look around, and you realize the West never wanted you to survive. It wanted you to notice, to lose, to carry, to surrender, and maybe, just maybe, to vanish with grace. You take off your boots, place them side by side. You lie down beside them, not to sleep, just to rest. And in the distance, the stars begin to flicker in strange patterns, as if blinking goodbye or welcome. You don't know which. You close your eyes. The dust settles around you. The land forgets, and so do you. Not all at once, but slowly, like everything else out here, like everything always has.